I need a general surgeon who can take over that work, reopen the hospital now that it's ready to function and carry it forward. I'm spread so thin with all the other ministries, which I really don't want to see them neglected.
Welcome to Updates from the Field, a production of HeartCry Missionary Society.
I'm here today with Dr. Charles Woodrow. He is he's a missionary in Mozambique. He's a church planter in Mozambique, and he's a medical doctor in Mozambique. And today, it is our privilege to hear from him regarding the work and regarding the many needs of that work. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
So tell me, when did the work get started, and how did it get started?
Well, our family has been in Mozambique since 1990. That's 32 years ago. And at that time, the country was an ardently Marxist country. I was sent over by our local church to be involved in medical evangelism. I was able to get into the country because I had medical skills, which were desperately needed at the time. And other missionaries were not welcome because of the Marxist government. So it was a wonderful opportunity for me to be in a place that definitely needed missionary services but was closed to other people. And I worked in a government hospital because I accepted a contract to be there in the northern part of Mozambique. And in a short period of time, I became the only doctor at that government hospital. And through our church, we were able to supply the hospital with everything that it needed to see the patients and remain open. And we provided everything that was necessary to outfit the surgical block because I was a general surgeon. And so the government let us operate out of that hospital like it was a missionary hospital.
That's
and we distributed Gospels of John to the patients in the clinic. We prayed with all of our patients before their operations, conducted evangelistic rounds, and every Sunday afternoon I would bring the people in the hospital to the main hall of the building and calling them to come hear the word of the Lord, receive help for your souls, and preach a gospel message that was translated into the local dialect. And was able to do all of this in a communist government hospital because they were desperate for surgeons. And despite the fact that in Mozambique at the time it was illegal for even a pastor to go into a public building like a hospital and pray at the bedside of one of his own parishioners out loud.
Wow.
So it was a wonderful opportunity for evangelism, and people responded, and I became involved in discipleship, and through the people who were discipled, eventually in church planting. After our third year there, we planted our first congregation in Nampula in Mozambique, and the ministry continued on, developing in different avenues as opportunities arose.
Wow. Now that ministry has evolved in two ways. One, talk to me about what has happened with regard to the medical ministry, and then share with me what has happened with regard to not just discipleship, but church planting.
Well, after the first many years working out of that government hospital, we began to outgrow the facility there. We only had one operating room, and so we had a maximum of 100 operations we could schedule a month. And we requested authorization from the government, which by that time had changed from a Marxist government. The Marxists themselves had decided after 15, 20 years that that was not working for them, and they actually embraced democracy with free market economy and all the rights that Western nations enjoy, including freedom of religion, and the opportunity for somebody besides the government to actually own and operate a hospital. And so we took advantage of the opportunity. We were on scene when those transformations took place. And I requested and received authorization to build a hospital owned by a mission, by ourselves. And so we began moving in that direction. Now, it took us a long time because the government wanted an expensive, nice hospital, much more than we were originally planning on building. Ended up having a price tag of over $1,200,000. And it took a while to get the money and the building erected. But during the time that we were working on getting the hospital established, which is now fully built and fully supplied, and we have Mozambican doctors to work there, and pharmacists and so forth. We do have some needs for missionary personnel in addition to what we have locally. But during the time that we spent trying to develop building the hospital and equipping it and staffing it, I also had time then to devote myself to trying to help the existing churches in Mozambique get a handle on the true gospel of salvation by grace through faith. One of the things that always discouraged me about the evangelistic opportunities at the hospital, we had many opportunities. People came from 5 provinces to our facility because we were supported by people here in the United States, by Christians who made sure we had all the equipment and material we needed to do the operations, whereas the government hospitals normally didn't have those supplies, and so operations were often done only to save life or limb. But here we could do every operation that we scheduled. So people were coming from all around, and of course those people were evangelized. The local people, as I mentioned, got involved in discipleship ministry with them and then church planting. But for all the people who had to scatter out to their homes far and wide, I knew that if they sought to learn more about Jesus Christ through the churches that were existing at the time, the evangelical churches almost all had a works-based gospel, and I knew that they would not be hearing what they needed to hear about salvation by grace through faith in Jesus Christ. And so when the opportunity came, when I had the time, not working at the government hospital anymore, but building our own hospital, we began devoting our efforts to trying to help the existing evangelical churches understand the true gospel. And we did this through literature distribution in association with Editora Fiel. That means faithful publishers. It's a Portuguese-speaking publishing house in Brazil that produced excellent literature carrying on the legacy of the Reformation Fathers that's still very important for the church today. And we distributed with them excellent Christian literature available to pastors who were willing to spend time reading it. And then from there, in a short while, we began having nationwide conferences that have been attended by people from church leaders from all of Mozambique's 10 provinces there in our city of Nampula. And books being sold at the conference was a great opportunity for these pastors who didn't have anywhere that they could get their hands on good Christian literature other than what we were making available to select pastors for free. And we saw that we needed to have a bookstore, so we got involved in a bookstore also. And that's been functioning since 2003 in Nampula. And since 2005, we've also been having training seminars for pastors in the important doctrines that they need to know, systematic theology and the like. And so that's what we've been involved in, to try to help other churches besides our own church planting efforts to be able to help people who are contacted with the gospel through medical evangelism at the hospital, which is on the verge of opening now.
So you mean opening after COVID, or?
Well, yes, our hospital was built. We had a beautiful hospital, and COVID hit, and we had our own plans to try to open the hospital. It hadn't been opened yet, and so when COVID hit in 2019, the government did not have a hospital they could dedicate to COVID patients, and they couldn't keep the COVID patients in the other hospitals because they didn't have COVID wards and the like. I felt like with our beautiful building, new building, ready to open, and yet not yet open, I felt like morally we were bound to offer it to the government. And so I approached them and told them that they could use our facility as the COVID hospital, and so we did become the COVID regional referral hospital for all the COVID patients in the northern third of Mozambique. And thankfully Mozambique was not hit nearly as hard as other countries, So we never filled the hospital completely with COVID patients, thankfully. But it was in the hands of the government for 18 months. But it was returned to us in November of 2021, and we had to spend about 6 months getting it totally rehabilitated again.
Right.
It was pretty much destroyed during the time that it was serving COVID. And so now it's again ready to open.
But that gesture of kindness also opened doors, don't you think, with the government, and strengthened relationships in the sense that they saw your kindness?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a wonderful opportunity. We did not go into it with any idea that we were going to benefit at all.
Right.
In fact, we knew that the hospital would be roughly used and have to be rehabilitated afterwards, but it did. It was wonderful how the governor, the Minister of Health, all of these people came trooping through, and we're very grateful for what they saw. Right. And in fact, it was a beautiful facility for treating COVID, and so they have bent over backwards to open all the doors for us.
And then not only is it true, not only you impacted churches throughout the country, but hasn't there also been churches planted?
We've planted, of course, the people I originally discipled. I got them involved in existing churches, but after several months, by unanimous consent, they said they really wanted to have a church for their families where they were hearing the same things they were learning in the Bible studies that we were conducting. Again, because generally the churches in Mozambique, especially at that time, were works-oriented in their view of salvation. And so we did plant a church with the original men in that class and their families. And then from that church, we've had 2 more that have been planted. So we have 3 churches going, Reformed churches, in our city of Nampula, which has a population of 800,000 people if you count everybody living within 20 kilometers of the city.
Wow.
So there's 3 churches equally spread out amongst the geographically.
Just for those of you who are listening, or maybe some of you young people who might be in medical school, or doctors who are wanting to use their profession for the Great Commission, there is no way that we can exaggerate how important and how useful medical missions can be. Now, let me ask you a question. It's amazing that in the context of the Great Commission, Jesus never really says pray for money, but he says pray for laborers. And oftentimes, well, almost always, qualified laborers are more difficult to find than monetary resources. And when you look at, you've got really this conglomerate of many essential ministries. So there's church planting, there's Bible conferences, and there's the publishing of literature. There's everything that has to do with having a hospital, caring for doctors, caring for the maintenances of buildings and all sorts of things. If you had all the qualified people in the world listening to you right now, who are thinking to themselves, oh, I would love to do medical missions, what are some types of qualified people that you need in Mozambique?
Well, beginning with the medical work, the Lord has been gracious to us. He's raised up excellent people within our own congregations. We've got 3 physicians and a dentist and 2 pharmacists and multiple nurses. What we're needing to get the hospital functioning eventually at full tilt, I'd like to have a Western-trained physician who has good general medical training. That would be like an emergency room doctor, somebody who can treat whatever shows up, or a family practitioner, or an internal medicine doctor with a broad background. We need somebody like that to back up our Mozambican-trained doctors who get good training for the most common illnesses that show up every day, but won't necessarily recognize the more unusual illnesses that appear because they don't have the postgraduate training like you get in the States where everybody specializes. And so we're looking for somebody who can back up those 3 doctors in the clinic. The hospital itself is a surgical hospital, according to the charter that the government gave us, and that's because I was a general surgeon and I was looking for a place to expand the ministry that had been going on at the government hospital initially. I need a general surgeon who can take over that work, reopen the hospital now that it's ready to function and carry it forward. I'm spread so thin with all the other ministries, which I really don't want to see them neglected. So we need a general surgeon for the surgical hospital to open the surgical wing of the building. And when a hospital is functioning, there's so much equipment. We already have a lot of equipment just in terms of buildings and vehicles and the like, but we need a plant manager, someone who can keep everything functioning and arrange for it to be repaired when it needs to be. So we're looking for those 3 positions especially, a physician with the general medical background and experience, a general surgeon, and of course anesthetist, anesthesiologist would be great to have. I always ended up doing my own anesthesia for the 3,500 procedures I did in the early years, but it would be good to have an anesthesiologist or an anesthetist. I didn't mention, we have one of those in our church, but he's retired, and we'll have to get him to come back out of retirement, but we do have an anesthetist in the church as well. But those are the areas that we're most in need of, and of course, there's a lot of administration that goes on.
What is your hope for the future?
Well, my vision is to see the hospital functioning. And again, as in the former days, people coming from all over the northern part of Mozambique to receive operations and hearing the gospel while they're there in the hospital. And then to be able to see these people routed into the churches that are associating with us through the conference ministry, which is nationwide, but it's most densely affecting the geographical area right around Nampula where we are. So it's drawing from the same catchment area as our patients are. So hopefully we'll be able to funnel people either into our churches if they live nearby or into other churches that are beginning to preach the gospel of salvation by grace through faith in Jesus Christ, so that they can grow. And we want to see the evangelical church in Mozambique being transformed and strengthened. We want to see our own church plants growing, and we want to see medical evangelism being followed up on by proper biblical discipleship, and see people coming to salvation and the church being strengthened. That's what I'm longing to see. And
now, in our conversations off camera, one of the things that impressed me is you kept mentioning that although the medical aspect of this ministry is so important and you want it to be the best of the best of the best, that it's still it's a means to an end, and that end is the Great Commission and the strengthening of the church and the salvation of souls. Could you comment on that a bit?
Well, of course, that's the finish line for us, is seeing the churches strengthened. Basically, Jesus Christ lifted high and exalted as he ought to be by people who now either don't even know him, they've never heard of him, or they don't care. And that's a situation that must be remedied throughout the whole planet. But the Lord has drawn my attention to Nampula and to Mozambique. So I'm desiring to see that happening there. And we're looking for missionaries who are going to, in their own mind, view the gospel as the primary purpose for being involved in missions. We want the physicians who are actually providing the care for these people to also be evangelizing them. I have my own little presentation about the wonderful opportunities of medical evangelism, and I'll rehearse some of them now. But the great benefit is that people come to you, you don't go to them, supposedly invading their privacy in order to tell them about Jesus Christ. They come to you you have the opportunity to evangelize a large geographical area as these people come from their homes from all over. Like I said, in the early days we had people coming from 5 provinces. We could evangelize 5 provinces right from where we were. And then you have the opportunity to tell people about Jesus Christ in the context of proving to them that your sole motive is to care for them and to seek their well-being. In a mission hospital, nobody's doing this for money. You're doing it to help people. And so they know that when you start telling them about Jesus Christ, that's also part of your desire to help them. And if you are, as a physician, able to solve problems that the witch doctors haven't cured, and they always go to the witch doctors first before they show up to you, and if you're able to solve these problems that others have not been able to solve, you've got a lot of credibility now when you start telling them that you've got another problem and it's a sickness of the soul and you don't even know it, but it's there, and you begin to describe man's need of salvation and reconciliation with God through Jesus Christ, then you've got a lot of credibility. And of course it establishes open doors. The ministry of a mission hospital is so well received by everybody that it opens doors for the church and gives you a community-wide testimony. And these are wonderful things. And not to capitalize on that, to just be known as a place where people can get medical care as they get in other facilities in existence. Not to capitalize on that is to miss the most important thing.
Amen.
And so we're looking for people who have that same burden.
Now, if I'm correct, Tim Challies and his guys came over there and did a film.
Yes, that's right.
What's the name of the film?
The name of the film was Faithful, and it's just talking about how God has blessed faithfully the ministry over 32 years. I think maybe they're focusing somewhat on the necessity of the people doing the work also to be faithful. But to me, the message is God's faithfulness and opening doors and blessing.
And so if someone just was to type in on Google, I guess, Faithful, Tim Challies, Dr. Woodrow, or Mozambique, it'll come up.
Yes, YouTube, Tim Challies, Faithful. They should pull up that video
Wonderful.
of our work.
Well, I want you to know, I mean, I've known about your ministry for years. We've talked, we've emailed. It's just, I think everything that if I myself, with my limited knowledge, if I could envision what I would want to see in a medical mission, it would be what you're doing in Mozambique. And I just want to encourage all of you to watch the film, Faithful, with Dr. Woodrow, and your lovely wife is in there, and just to see what God is doing. But also, we were talking about this earlier. So many people have no idea that the needs on the mission field are far more diverse than what you would think. Do you know that 2 of the most pristine people in the scriptures were both administrators? Daniel, Joseph. God used their administrative ability to save his people, to be a witness to the pagan world. And with regard to missions, especially in the context of the hospital, you may be out there thinking, I'm an administrator, I'm a technician, or I'm a doctor, and I love my profession, but there's, how can I be used to advance the Great Commission? How can I be used to change the world? And I think you may have learned something today. There is a great need for laborers. And not all those laborers are preachers in the sense of expositors or theologians in the sense of having their PhD or their master's degree in theology. The mission field and mission works also need administrators, technicians, doctors. And if you want to use your skills in that way, pray and seek out opportunities. And if any of you feel like a great burden to go practice medicine in Mozambique, at least you could maybe give Dr. Woodrow send him an email. And we'll make all that available for you. Brother, it has been a tremendous privilege to talk to you. And I hope next year, if my health is good, to get over there with you. When is the conference?
The 17th, 18th through the 22nd of July,
Okay.
2023. We're asking you to come out.
Well, if I'm still kicking, I would love to come out. Thank you so much. And God bless you for watching this video. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Updates from the Field. To learn more about HeartCry and to view our other productions, visit heartcrymissionary.com.